Alright, so we're recording this audio and video of the poll just to see if later reports of what happened here match up with the reality.
I don't have a super PAC. I don't want campaign contributions from corporate America. And let me be clear. While there's some great corporations creating jobs and trying to do the right thing,
went way down.
in my view,
half
and
down.
I say this very seriously,
That's 41%.
the greed
they all
of
went
the
over
billionaire
here.
class.
So every time Hillary's talking, everybody's over here. And every time he's talking, they go over here. That's awesome. I'm impressed too. Why not?
Of Americans. We need an economy that works for the middle class, not just a handful of billionaires, and I will fight and lead to make that happen.
Senator, thank you. I want to take a plan because there is a value. Let me just ask you though, because it is an important question. How important a role do you think corporate America plays in a healthy economy here in the U.S.? Look, I look at our economy and it's an ecosystem. And the fact of the matter is that the more fully people participate, the more our workers earn, the more they will spend, the more our economy will grow. And most heads of businesses, large, medium, and small, understand that. But there is a better way forward.
Nothing's changed because he hasn't said anything yet.
My two opponents here on this stage. We're not going to fix what ails our economy. We're not going to make wages go up for everyone by either trying to replace American capitalism with socialism, which, by the way, the rest of the world is moving away from, nor will we fix it by submitting to sort of Wall Street-directed crony capitalism.
It just went up.
And for my part, I have demonstrated the ability to have the backbone to take on Wall Street in ways the Secretary
You know what I am? I'm
never,
disappointed that this guy's even in this
debate. Very
That's
shamefully, she tried to hide her cozy relationship with Wall Street big banks by invoking the attacks of 9/11. I believe that the way forward for our country is to actually reinvigorate our antitrust department with the directive to promote fair competition. There's mergers that are happening in every aspect of our country that is bad for competition. And it's bad for upward mobility of wages. And the worst type of concentration, Secretary Clinton, is the concentration of the big banks. The big six banks that you went to and spoke to and told them, oh, you weren't responsible for the crash, not by a long shot. And that's why today you still cannot support, as I do, breaking up the big banks and making sure that we pass a modern-day Glass-Steagall like we had in late 1999 before it was repealed and led to the crash where so many millions of families lost their jobs and their homes. And
people aren't as angry as when Hillary is talking.
Oh, people are starting to click now. All these wrapping up. Let's see.
Let me just ask you.
Let me respond.
Secretary.
The impressed numbers stayed kind of high.
David, so let me respond very
He's a good speaker.
In particular.
Number one, there are
anytime he
currently
says something
two
good, people
hedge fund billionaires running
Because they
ads
won't be
against
expecting
here in New Hampshire. They started in Iowa.
Oh, look, 31%.
Now you have to ask yourself, why are they running ads against me?
Wow, people.
And the answer is
She makes
because
people
they
angry.
know I will go right after them. That I will not
She's a
let
lawyer,
their agenda be
you know?
America's agenda. Secondly, I think it's important to point out that about 3% of my donations come from people in the finance and investment world. You can go to opensecrets.org and check that.
I might actually
have more
do that.
donations from students and teachers than I do from people associated with Wall Street. Now, number three, and let me say this. When Governor O'Malley was heading the Democratic Governors Association, he had no trouble at all going to Wall Street to raise money to run campaigns for Democratic governors. And he also had no trouble appointing an investment banker to be in charge of his Consumer Protection Bureau when he was governor. So, again, the difference between us and the Republicans is night and day. And there is only one person on this stage who voted to take away authority from the SEC and the Commodities Future Trading Commission that they could no longer regulate what are called swaps and derivatives, which actually contributed to the
Because
collapse
they're
of Lehman
illegal
Brothers.
anyway.
And that was Senator Sanders.
Because they're fucking
if we're
illegal
gonna be talking
anyway.
Like this, we can, and maybe we can score some
Look at
political
this.
points. But the fact is,
Me too.
one of us stands for the kind of for every American, and if that means taking on Wall Street, I have a plan that is tough and comprehensive and praised by a lot of folks who say it goes further than what both Senator Sanders and Governor O'Malley are proposing.
Ooh, look at that.
just jump in. My name was invoked.
Senator.
So without invocation, let me say a few words. Secretary Clinton, I don't have a super PAC. I don't get any money from Wall Street. You have gotten a whole lot of money over the years from Wall Street. But most important, when you look at what happened in the 1990s, go to BernieSanders.com. I'll advertise my website as well. And what you'll find is that I helped lead the effort as a member of the House Financial Committee against Alan Greenspan, against Bill Clinton, maybe you know him, maybe you don't, against the Republican leadership, who all thought it would be a great idea to merge investor banks and commercial banks and large insurance companies. What a brilliant idea that would be. Go to YouTube, find out what I said to Greenspan. At the end of the day, if Teddy Roosevelt were alive today, and the governor makes a good point about trade, anti-trade, anti-monopoly activities. Wall Street today has too much political power. It has too much economic power. To get deregulated, listen to this. They spent $5 billion in lobbying and campaign contributions over a 10-year period.
Senator Sanders.
Wall Street is a threat to the economy. They've got to be broken up.
Thank you, Senator.
And we're going to move on to health care. Secretary Clinton, the Department of Health and Human Services says more than 17 million Americans who were not insured now have health coverage because of Obamacare. But for Americans who already had health insurance, the cost has gone up 27% in the last 5 years, while deductibles
That's
are
it?
67%
27% 5 years? That's
healthcare
it?
Costs are rising faster than many Americans can manage.
I've had my
Broken
insurance
in
premiums
Obamacare
almost
that
double
needs to be fixed right
between
now,
years, or
and
go up
what would you do
30%
to
in 1
fix
year.
it?
Go up
Well, I would
20% in
certainly
1 year.
build on
My
the
health insurance
successes
premiums, even
of the
through my
Affordable Care
employer.
Act and work
Through my
to
employer.
fix some of the glitches that you just referenced. Number one, we do have more people who have access to health care. We have ended the terrible situation that people with pre-existing conditions were faced with where they couldn't find at any affordable price health care. Women are not charged more than men any longer for our health insurance. And we keep young people on our policies until they turn 26. Those are all really positive developments. But out-of-pocket costs have gone up too much, and prescription drug costs have gone through the roof. And so what I have proposed, number one, is a $5,000 tax credit to help people who have very large out-of-pocket costs be able to afford those. Number two, I want Medicare to be able to negotiate for lower drug prices, just
the
like
crowd
they
was going,
negotiate with
there.
other countries' health systems. We end up paying the highest prices in the world. And I want us to be absolutely clear about making sure the insurance companies in the private employer policy arena, as well as in the Affordable Care exchanges, are properly regulated so that we are not being gamed. And I think that's an important point to make, because I'm going through and analyzing the points you were making, Martha. We don't have enough competition, and we don't have enough oversight of what the insurance companies are charging everybody right now.
But you did say those were glitches.
Yes.
Just glitches?
Well, they're glitches because
27% in the last 5 years, deductibles up 67%.
I knew she was going to get shit for
it
that.
is, because part of this is the startup challenges that this system is facing. We have fought as Democrats for decades to get a health care plan. I know, I've got the scars to show from the effort back in the early 90s. We want to build on it and fix it, and I am confident we can do that. And it will have effects in the private market. And one of the reasons in some states why the percentage cost has gone up so much is because governors there would not extend Medicaid. And so people are still going to get health care, thankfully, in emergency rooms, in hospitals. Those costs are then added to the overall cost, which does increase the insurance premiums for people in the
Bullshit's just not good enough for us anymore.
Senator Sanders, I want you to respond to what she was saying, but you're instead calling for single-payer health care.
Exactly.
No, people won't have to pay deductibles or premiums, but they will have to pay new taxes.
Yes.
Can you tell us specifically how much people will be expected
roughly,
to
But
pay?
let me say this. I serve as a member of the Health Education Committee that helped write the Affordable Care Act. Much of what Secretary Clinton said about what we have
impressed with
done,
that.
among other things, ending the obscenity of this pre-existing situation is a step forward. 17 million more people have health care. It is a step forward. But this is what we also have to say. Not only are deductibles rising, 29 million Americans still have no health insurance, and millions of people can't afford to go to the doctor. Major crisis in primary health care. Here is the bottom line. Why is it that the United States of America today is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right? Why is it?
Whoa,
is
did
it
you see
we
that?
are-
And he
why is
started
it
going
that
back
we
to his
spend
main
almost 3 times per capita
talking points,
as
and
to
all
what
of a
they
sudden,
spend in
bam.
UK, 50% more than what they say in what they pay in France, countries that guarantee health care to all of their people, and in many cases have better health care outcomes. Bottom line, this ties into campaign finance reform. The insurance companies, the drug companies are bribing the United States Congress. We need to pass a Medicare for all single-payer system.
Damn.
It will lower the cost of health care for a middle-class family by thousands of dollars a year.
Senator Sanders, you didn't really tell us specifically how much people will be expected to pay.
But they will not be paying, Martha, any private insurance. So it's unfair to say in total.
But you can't tell us a specific.
I can tell you that adding up the fact that you are not paying any private insurance, businesses are not paying any private insurance, the average middle-class family will be saving thousands of dollars a year.
Okay, let's go to talk about the high cost of college education. And
My
for
insurance
that, we
was
turn to the
$10,000
executive
a
director
year.
of the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, right here at St. Anselm College. Neil
So
Levesque.
most
Neil?
procedures pay 80%.
Here to New Hampshire
The
again.
20%.
As you
Once you
know,
hit
this audience
$10,000,
is
they pay
filled with many
100%.
St. Anselm College students, and they know that
Some
the
things are less
outstanding
than
student
80%
debt right now
that they pay.
in
And some
America
are
is
100%.
$1.3 trillion. That private education costs have gone up in the last decade 26% and 40% for public education. So knowing that, we know that you want to make higher education more affordable. But how do you really lower the costs? Senator Sanders, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you want free tuition for public colleges. And how does that really lower the costs other than just shifting the cost to taxpayers?
Well, Neil, I think we have got to work on a two-pronged approach. And your point is absolutely well taken. The cost of college education is escalating a lot faster than the cost of inflation. There are a lot of factors involved in that. And that is that we have some colleges and universities that are spending a huge amount of money on fancy dormitories and on giant football stadiums. Maybe we should focus on quality education with well-paid faculty members. But
Yeah. Instead of $1 million fucking
many
football
universities, a heck of a lot of vice presidents
salary, you
who
know.
earn a big salary. But bottom line is, this is the year 2015. If we are going to be competitive in the global economy, we need the best educated workforce. It is insane, to my mind. Hundreds of thousands of young people today, bright, qualified people, cannot go to college because they cannot afford, their families cannot afford to send them. Millions coming out of school, as you indicated, deeply in debt. What do? My proposal is to put a speculation tax on Wall Street, raise very substantial sums of money, not only make public colleges and universities tuition free, but also substantially lower interest rates on student debt. You have families out there paying 6, 8, 10% on student debt, refinance their homes at 3%. What sense is that? So I think we need radical changes in the funding of higher
Not as
education.
simple as that
We
guy
should
was
look
making
at
it
college
sound.
today the way high school was looked at 60 years ago. All young people have the ability, should be able to get a college education.
Governor O'Malley, how do you propose? Governor O'Malley, how do you propose lowering some of these costs that are associated with higher education?
Yeah, this one falls under the category of I have actually done this. As a governor, we actually made the greater investments so that we could go 4 years in a row without a penny's increase to college tuition. My plan actually goes further than Senator Sanders. because a big chunk of the cost is actually room and board and books and fees. So as a nation, we need to increase what we invest in Pell Grants. Yes, we need to make it easier for parents to refinance, but states need to do more as well. And I propose a block grant program that will keep the states in the game as well. I believe that all of our kids should go into an income-based repayment plan. I'm joined tonight by my two daughters, Tara and Grace. My oldest daughter's a teacher. Man, their mother's here as well. We were proud of them on graduation day, weren't we, Katie? And we're going to be proud every month for the rest of our lives. I mean, we had to borrow so much money to send them to college.
So he kind
and we're not the only
of agreed with Bernie's stance, but kind of built on it a
America
little,
who
I
aren't
guess.
able to contribute to our economy because of this crushing student loan.
Oh, that's
I
funny.
also propose that we can
Lightsaber dildos.
a tax on high volume trades, and we need to, because my dad went to college after coming back from World War II on a GI Bill. But today we're the only nation on the planet that's saddling our kids with a lifetime of bills. That's a drag on the economy. It's one of the key investments we need to make. I was flattered that Secretary Clinton 2 months later borrowed so many of my proposals to incorporate into hers. And in our party, unlike the Republican Party, we actually believe that the more our people learn, the more they will earn, and higher education should be a right for every kid.
Secretary Clinton.
Right.
Secretary Clinton, how does your plan
differentiate from your opponents?
Well, I have what I call the New College Compact because I think everybody has to have some skin in this game, Neil. Number one, states have been disinvesting in higher education. In fact, I think New Hampshire in-state tuition for public
missed all the
college and
foreign
university
policy
is
the
among
first
the
time.
highest, if not the highest, in the country.
Oh, dang.
So states over a period of decades have put their money elsewhere, into prisons, into highways, into things other than higher education. So under my
Baseballs.
compact,
I
They're
just
bringing
watched
that
that today. While I was
states
cleaning
began to put back in
the bathroom.
to
I
the
had it
higher
on.
education system. Secondly, I don't believe in free tuition for everybody.
We're gonna be
I
sharing
believe
this
we should
online.
focus on
Awesome.
middle-class families, working families, and poor kids who have the ambition and the talent to go to college and get ahead. So I have proposed debt-free tuition, which I think is affordable.
Oh,
And
everybody's
I would
angry
move
again.
a lot of
Hillary's
Pell Grant
talking.
and other aid into the arena where it could be used for living
Too
expenses.
deep into
So I
bullshit.
put all this together
Her
again on my
husband is a
website, and I'm pleased
president.
that I've gotten such a good response. But I want to quickly say that one of the
Negative
areas that Senator
associations
Sanders
with
touched
Hillary
on
for some reason.
in talking about education and certainly talking about health care is his commitment to really changing the systems. Free college, a single-payer system for health care. And it's been estimated we're looking at $18 to $20 trillion, about a 40% increase in the federal budget. And I have looked at his proposed plans for health care, for example, and it really does transfer every bit of our health care system, including private health care, to the states to have the states run. And I think
Holy
we've
shit.
got to be really thoughtful about
It
how
is.
we're going to afford what we propose, which is why everything that I have proposed, I will tell you exactly how I'm going to pay for it, including college.
Can I
Thank you,
respond
Secretary
to
Clinton.
the critique
Thank
on
Neil,
health
Back
care?
to you, David.
Thank you. We're going to get right into this, Senator, because I want to ask about taxes
Well,
next.
my
This is
name
included.
was just,
She was asking about that.
but Secretary Clinton is wrong. As you know, because I know you know a lot about healthcare.
She's just
You
wrong.
know that the United States per capita
This is
pays
fucking
far
around.
and away more than any other country. And it is unfair simply to say how much more the program will cost without making sure that people know we are doing away with the cost of private insurance and that the middle class will be paying substantially less for health care under single payer than under Secretary Clinton's proposal.
Well, the only thing that I
Secretary,
on,
Senator,
Senator
hold on
Sanders,
one moment.
is your
Senator Sanders,
proposals,
I
and
do
your
want to ask you-
proposals go
I want to
and
ask
send the
about
healthcare
Secretary
system
A bunch of people
to
tried to
states.
click over.
Please.
And my
Well,
analysis
Bernie
is
was
that
watching.
you are going to have to get more taxes out of middle-class families.
Now
I'm
they're
the
gonna
only
So let's
person
ask
on this
about that.
stage
Secretary,
saying
let's turn to
no
taxes.
middle-class tax raises. That
It
is
seems
not
there's
on the
like
table
about
as far as I'm
Next to
concerned.
taxes.
20% of the people in the poll
This is
just
democracy
jump back
at
and
work.
forth.
And Secretary Clinton, let me ask
Kinda
you
like
about
me.
the tax plan,
It's almost like-
because from the
It's almost like
crushing
20% of the
cost
people that
college education,
participate in
the next
this
question
are
most
just
families
like
have
diehard
is,
Bernie
will my taxes
fans.
go up under
And they're
the
just
next
going to
president?
click angry
You have said it's
when
your
she's
goal not
talking
to raise
and
taxes
impressed when
on
he's
families making
talking.
under
They're just gonna go back and forth.
$250,000 a year.
But 20%
Can you say that's
of
a
the people
promise as you stand here
participating in
tonight?
this,
That is a
that
pledge
is a
that I'm
big
making. I
chunk
made it
of people
when I
who are
ran
just
in
going to be
2008. Yes. And
Stuck
it was the
between
same
those
one
two,
that,
just
President
already
Obama,
convinced.
made.
That's a lot.
Because I don't think we should be imposing new big programs that are going to raise middle-class
voting
families'
block.
taxes. We just heard that most families haven't had a wage
Deja
increase
commented on
since
something.
2001, since, you know, the end of the last Clinton administration, when incomes did go up for everybody. And we've got to get back to where people can save money again, where they can invest in their families, and I don't think a middle-class tax should be part of anybody's plan right now.
Let me respond.
Secretary Clinton.
Let me respond to two things. Number one, most important economic reality of today is that over the last 30 years, there has been a transfer of trillions of dollars from the middle class to the top 1/10% who have seen a doubling of the percentage of wealth that they own. Now, when Secretary Clinton says, I'm not going to raise taxes on the middle class, let me tell you what she is saying. She is disagreeing with FDR and Social Security, LBJ on Medicare, and with the vast majority of progressive Democrats in the House and the Senate who today are fighting to end the disgrace of the United States being the only major country on earth that doesn't provide paid family and medical leave. What the legislation is $1.61 a week. Now, you can say that's a tax on the middle class. It will provide 3 months paid family and medical leave for the working families of this country. I think Secretary Clinton, $1.61 a week is a pretty good investment.
Senator, thank you. I want to bring in Governor O'Malley on this. And Governor O'Malley, let me ask.
For paid
You've
family
heard
leave for a very long
Secretary
time.
Clinton. David, thank
I
you.
have a way to pay for it that actually makes the wealthiest pay for it.
And join us. Well, every
not
progressive
everybody else.
Democrat and senator is supportive of this proposal introduced by your good friend and my good friend, Kirsten Gillibrand, Rosa DeLauro. That is the legislation out there that will finally provide family
Thank
medical
you. I
leave.
want to bring in Governor O'Malley on this. We heard the promise there from Secretary Clinton because people want to know about their taxes. Will they go up? She has now promised here tonight not to raise them on families making $250,000 or less. Can you make that same promise if you're elected?
No, I've never made a promise like that, but unlike either of these two fine people, I've actually balanced the budget every single year. I was one of only 7 states that had a AAA bond rating. By the time I left, the average tax burden on Maryland families was the same as when I started, but I did pass a more progressive income tax and asked the highest earning people to pay another 14%. David, look, this is the big, I agree, by the way, that we should have paid family leave. And I agree with Senator Sanders on that. And just like Social Security, and unlike the Republicans, I think we should actually expand Social Security and increase average monthly benefits. But look, there's
I wonder
one
if he's
big
been doing this
entitlement
all
we can no
night. Did we
longer
miss?
afford as a country.
Has he just been agreeing
And
with
that is
Bernie
the
all night?
entitlement that the super wealthy among
And then
us,
saying, I'll
those earning
just
more
do a
than
little bit
$1
more.
million,
That and
feel
I've
that
done
they're
this.
entitled
I've
to
done,
pay
yeah.
Those are his
lower
two
income
things.
tax
I agree
rates
with you, and
a
I've
far
done this.
lower
That's what I've seen
preferred
so far, which
income
is
tax
good.
rate
I
when
mean,
it comes to capital
it's good to
gains.
be able to say you've got some
We
experience.
would have
in
raised the
there.
marginal rate to 45%.
Not
for
as much
people
as Bernie,
earning more than
though.
$1 million. And if we tax capital gains essentially the same
In
we
the
do
big picture, anyway.
earnings from hard work and sweat and toil, you could generate $800 billion over the next 10 years. And that would do so much good for affordable college, debt-free college, cutting youth unemployment in half, investing
You
in our
notice how when
cities
he's
again.
talking, nobody
So,
knows what to
the things
do,
I've
and all the
done in
numbers,
office
wherever they
are
were
the
when he
things that actually
started.
They
invest
kinda
in
go-
growing our
Well, no, they
economy
just kind of
and
stay
making
where they
wages
were
go up.
because
That's the issue that we need to
nobody's
tackle as
clicking anything
Americans, and
new.
we
I
can do
think.
it,
I think they're
and
just
we
kind of
know
waiting
how.
for
Governor
him.
O'Malley, thank you. A
Stop
spirited debate on
talking.
taxes. It will be much more of a Democratic debate in New Hampshire when we come back, right here on ABC. More to more.
ABC
All right,
News
commercial
live coverage of the New Hampshire Democratic debate will continue in a moment.
All right, so let's see here. Oh. So we were trying to find a live poll like CNN had on the last one, unsuccessfully, and this was all we found. You can still tell a little bit about the statistics as time goes on, and people jump back and forth between impressed and angry, but haven't been able to really find. Yeah, let's do that hashtag #DemDebate search again and see maybe if there's something we are looking for in here. No. Oh, you know the American family. Oh, Jeb Bush. We can't afford. I don't care what you think we can afford. Bernie Sanders campaign. All right, I think we're going to pause the recording until it comes back on. Can we pause it, or does it just stop? I forgot. I haven't used this. Oh, here it is. I think it'll just stop if we stop recording. I don't think we can just pause it.
So we have more than one file.
Well, I can always cut it out, you know what I mean? But for now, let's just let it record.
Okay.
If I want to cut out the commercials, we can cut out the commercials.
We talk about lightsaber dildos.
Yeah, lightsaber dildos. Or we can pretend like we've got our own radio show. I could ask you some questions about how you feel about the debate. Oh, it's back on. There we go. Yeah, turn it back on.
And the debate will continue in just a minute. Back here with John Carl and Bernie Sanders. So he's having some fun now. The debate over taxes.
Okay, so you people can either listen to them bullshit or listen to us bullshit. So I'm going to turn down them. Although, I wonder if people will still vote on what these guys are talking about. You know what I mean? I'm just going to vote that I'm angry that we have to listen to these fucking talking heads. How about that? So sick of it. And I think that's why on the internet Bernie does so well, because Bernie followers are the type of people that feel like they're not being fooled by the status quo or what the media wants to be the status quo. Because you see over and over and over and over again, every Democratic debate or every time they're talking about politics, whoever works for the news station, radio station, whatever, they're always trying to spin it to make Hillary sound good. Like, for example, earlier today, they were talking about that whole accidental access to voter records. And I heard it on the radio like 4 times today, like to and from work. And the person who was introducing the story to the person they were interviewing would always spin it as Bernie doing some terrible thing that he was going to sue, even though he was like totally like stealing information and all this other stuff, and like trying to make it sound like that. And then the person that they were asking the questions was like, well, first of all, it's not between Bernie's campaign and Hillary's campaign. It's not like there's a battle there. I mean, it's between Bernie's campaign and the Democratic National what is it? Not the DNC, but the what's it called? Committee, yeah. I kept calling it the convention because they had the convention here. But yeah, and they always twist it around. But all the people that you see jumping back and forth here, they're all people that hear that shit and they're like, same old shit. I've seen it a million times. I'm just gonna support who we like. And thanks to things like this on the internet, they can actually see that there are other people out there who feel the same way. Mm-hmm. They don't necessarily have to buy into the whole thing about, because there's always one, at least one, or at least most of the Democrats that you talk to will be like, yeah, I like Bernie, but meh, he can't win. He's not going to win. It's not possible. Well, less and less. But you'll still hear it. Like, just watch. After this debate, you go on Facebook, you'll see all those naysayers.
Yeah, there's always those. Or naysayers about, some of the Republicans.
Right. Well, that's why I'm recording this, though. We'll show them that vast majority of people who, well, at least people who are willing to sit and click on these things, are Bernie supporters. All right, so here we go. Is it back?
Welcome back tonight to New Hampshire. The Democratic debate continues here on ABC. And Secretary Clinton, we want to turn to race now in America. There is a real concern in this country from Black Lives Matter and from other community groups that we're just now seeing with smartphones and cell phones what many have been dealing with for years. when they come in contact with police. But you also have many in law enforcement who now say there's been a so-called Ferguson effect. Police holding back because they're afraid of backlash. In fact, the FBI director calling it a chill wind blowing through American law enforcement. So if elected president, how would you bridge the divide between the two?
David, I think this is one of the most important challenges facing not just our next president, but our country. We have systemic racism and injustice and inequities in our country, and in particular in our justice system, that must be addressed and must be ended. I feel very strongly that we have to reform our criminal justice system, and we have to find ways to try to bring law enforcement together again with the communities that they are sworn to protect. Trust has been totally lost in a lot of places. At the same time, we know that in many parts of our country, police officers are bridging those divides, and they're acting heroically. The young officer who was killed responding to the Planned Parenthood murders, the officer who told the victims of the San Bernardino killings that he would take a bullet before them. So I think that we need to build on the work of the Policing Commission that President Obama impaneled. We need to get a bipartisan commitment to work together on this. And we need to hear the voices of those men and women and boys and girls.
They just hate Hillary. It's not that she's saying anything bad.
And do whatever is necessary to not only deal with the immediate problems within the criminal justice system.
I think it's that not that she's saying something that they disagree with. I think it's that people don't feel she's genuine.
That very valuable asset known as trust.
Secretary, thank you. Governor O'Malley, how would you...
They're like, she's not going to actually...
There is no issue in American public policy that I have worked on more day in and day out than this painful issue of policing, of law enforcement, criminal justice, and race in America. When I ran in 1999, David, for mayor of Baltimore, our city by that year had become the most addictive, violent, and abandoned in America. But we came together.
I think he's an elf on a shelf.
People together over some very
I think he's a
deep
wooden
racial
elf on a
divides.
shelf without his hat.
And we were able to put our city on a path for the biggest reduction in crime of any major city in America over the next 10 years. As governor, we continued to work together. We reduced violent crime to 30-year lows, but get this, we also reduced incarceration rates to 20-year lows. So it is possible, actually, to find the things that actually work, that we did, increasing drug treatment, using big data to better protect the lives of young people, cut juvenile crime in half, and it's also possible to improve how we police our police. Look, there wasn't a single day as mayor of Baltimore that I wasn't asked whether I was delivering on the promise I made to police the police. We reported excessive force, discourtesy, use of lethal force. In fact, drove down to 3 of the 4 lowest years on record, police use of lethal force. As a nation, we have to embrace this moment and make our departments more open, more transparent, and more accountable. Just as we require every major department, every county to report its major crimes, we should require police departments to report their discourtesy, brutality, excessive force. There's so much work that can be done, so much we've learned to do better. We need to do it now as a nation. This is our time and our opportunity to do that.
Governor, thank you. And Senator Sanders, when you hear the FBI director calling it a chill wind blowing through American law enforcement, does that concern you as well?
Well, this whole issue concerns me. I agree with much of what the Secretary and the Governor have said, but let's be clear. Today in America, we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. 2.2 million people, predominantly African American and Hispanic. We are spending $80 billion a year locking up our fellow Americans. I think, and this is not easy, but I think we need to wage a major effort to come together as a country and end institutional racism. We need major reforms of a very broken criminal justice system. Now, what does that mean? Well, for a start, it means that police officers should not be shooting unarmed people, predominantly African Americans. It means that we have to rethink the so-called war on drugs, which has destroyed the lives of millions of people, which is why I have taken marijuana out of the Controlled Substance Act, so that it will not be a federal crime. Yay. That is why we need to make police, and I speak as a former mayor. I was a mayor for 8 years, worked very closely with the Greek Police Department. And what we did is try to move that department toward community policing so that the police officers become part of the community and not, as we see in some cities, an oppressive force. We need to make police departments look like the communities they serve in terms of diversity. We need to end minimal sentencing. We need basically to pledge that we're going to invest in this country in jobs and education, not more jails and incarceration.
Senator, thank you. We want to turn now to an issue. This next issue is
28% excited,
across the country,
49%
and in particular right here in New Hampshire, heroin. And there's a stunning new figure out. A recent poll, 48% here in this state alone say they know someone who has abused heroin. We're going to turn tonight to Dan Toohey of the New Hampshire Union Leader, who has this question.
New Hampshire has been hard hit by the heroin epidemic. We're on track to have twice as many overdose deaths this year as in 2013. What specifically would you do to address this crisis?
Senator Sanders, I'm going to take this to you first because you've seen what's happened with heroin right on the border in your own state.
Look, this is a tragedy for New Hampshire. It is a tragedy for my state of Vermont. It is a tragedy all over this country. The number of heroin deaths are growing very, very significantly. What do we do? Well, for a start, this may seem like a radical idea, but I think we have got to tell the medical profession and doctors who are prescribing opiates and the pharmaceutical industry that they have got to start getting their act together. We cannot have this huge number of opiates out there throughout this country where young people are taking them, getting hooked, and then going to heroin. Second of all, the reason that I believe in a healthcare for all program, we need to understand that addiction is a disease, not a criminal activity. And that
Absolutely agree with that.
And that means radically changing the way we deal with mental health and addiction issues. When somebody is addicted and seeking help, they should not have to wait 3-4 months in order to get that help. They should be able to walk in the door tomorrow and get a variety of treatments that work for them. So those are some of the areas that I think we've got to move on.
Senator, thank you. Secretary Clinton?
You know, on my very first visit to New Hampshire in this campaign, I was in Keene, and I was asked, what are you going to do about the heroin epidemic? And all over New Hampshire, I met grandmothers who are raising
old school
children
politics.
because they've lost.
When I was in New Hampshire, I met little Jimmy, and little Jimmy, he brought a tear to my eye.
To get clean and have nowhere to go because there are not enough facilities. So this is a major epidemic, and it has hit New Hampshire and Vermont particularly hard. I've had 2 town halls, one in Keene, one in Laconia, dedicated exclusively to talking about what we can do, and I've heard some great ideas about how law enforcement is changing its behavior, how the recovery community is really reaching out. And I was proud to get the endorsement of Mayor Walsh of Boston, who has made his struggle with alcoholism a real clarion call for action in this arena. So I've laid out a 5-point plan about what we can do together. I would like the federal government to offer $10 billion over 10 years to work with states, and I really applaud Governor Hassan for taking up this challenge and working with the legislature here to come up with a plan. We have to do more on the prescribing end of it. There are too many opioids being prescribed, and that leads directly now to heroin addiction. And we have to change the way we do law enforcement. And of course, we need more programs and facilities. So when somebody is ready to get help, there's a place for them to go. And every law enforcement should carry the antidote to overdose, naloxone, so that they can save lives that are on the brink of expiring.
Secretary, thank you.
I know a great deal about this issue. And I have a dear friend, played music with him for years. Remember when he came home with his baby girl, and now she's no longer with us because of addiction and overdose. Last time in New Hampshire, I had to take a break shortly after landing and call home and comfort a friend whose mother died of an overdose. Drugs have taken far too many of our citizens. It's a huge public health challenge. In our own city, I mentioned before, we have become the most addicted city in America. But together, every single year, I expanded drug treatment funding in our city, and then I expanded it in our state. And we were saving lives every single year, doing the things that work, intervening earlier, understanding the continuum of care that's required until we got hit, like every other state, in the United States, especially in New Hampshire and in the Northeast, with this opioid addiction, the overprescribing. I agree we need better. We need to rein in the overprescribing. But I have put forward on my plan a $12 billion federal investment. We have to invest in the local partnerships. And the best place to intervene, the best indicator of when a person is actually on the verge of killing themselves because of an addiction, is at the hospital. That very first time they show up with a near miss, we should be intervening there. That's what I said to my own public health people. What would we do if this were Ebola? How would we act? So many more Americans have been killed by the combination of heroin and these highly addictive pain pills, and yet we refuse to act. There are things that can be done. Go onto my website. My plan is there. It's one of 15 strategic goals I've set out to make our country a better place by cutting these sorts of deaths in half in the next 5 years.
Governor O'Malley, thank you.
Secretary Clinton, I want to circle back to something that your
that's one.
opponents here have brought
That's
up.
important, but
Libya is falling apart. The country is a haven for ISIS and jihadists with an estimated 2,000 ISIS fighters there today. You advocated for that 2011 intervention and called it smart power at its best. And yet even President Obama said the U.S. should have done more to fill the leadership vacuum left behind. How much responsibility do you bear for the chaos that followed elections?
Well, first, let's remember why we became part of a coalition to stop Gaddafi from committing massacres against his people. The United States was asked to support the Europeans and the Arab partners that we had, and we did a lot of due diligence about whether we should or not, and eventually, yes, I recommended and the president decided that we would support the action to protect civilians on the ground, and that led to the overthrow of Gaddafi. I think that what Libya then did by having a full, free election, which elected moderates, was an indication of their crying need and desire to get on the right path. Now, the whole region has been rendered unstable, in part because of the aftermath of the Arab Spring, in part because of the very effective outreach and propagandizing that ISIS and other terrorist groups do. But what we're seeing happening in Libya right now is that there has been a fragile agreement to put aside the differences that exist among Libyans themselves to try to dislodge ISIS from Sirte, the hometown of Gaddafi, and to begin to try to create a national government. You know, this is not easy work. We did a lot to help. We did as much as we could because the Libyans themselves had very strong feelings about what they wished to accept. But we're always looking for ways about what more we can do to try to give people a chance to be successful.
Secretary Clinton, I want to go back. That government lacked institutions and experience. It had been a family business for 40 years. On the security side, we offered only a modest training effort and a very limited arms buyback program. Let me ask you the question again. How much responsibility do you bear for the chaos that followed those elections?
No, Martha, we offered a lot more than they were willing to take. We offered a lot more. We also got rid of their chemical weapons, which was a big help. And we also went after a lot of the shoulder-fired missiles to round them up.
You have.
You know, we can't, if we're not going to send American troops, which there was never any idea of doing that, then to try to send trainers, to try to send experts is something we offered, Europeans offered, the UN offered, and there wasn't a lot of responsiveness at first. I think a lot of the Libyans who had been forced out of their country by Gaddafi, who came back to try to be part of a new government, believed they knew what to do, and it turned out that they were no match for some of the militaristic forces inside that country. But I'm not giving up on Libya, and I don't think anybody should. We've been at this for mistakes made.
Might make her look
there's
bad.
always a retrospective to say what mistakes were made. But I know that we offered a lot of help, and I know it was difficult for the Libyans to accept help. What we could have done if they had said yes would have been a lot more than what we were able to have done.
Senator Sanders. Senator Sanders.
Look, the Secretary's right. This is a terribly complicated issue. There are no simple solutions. But where we have a disagreement is that I think if you look at the history of regime changes, you go back to Mossadegh in Iran, you go back to Salvador Allende, who we overthrew in Chile, you go back to overthrowing Saddam Hussein in Iraq, you go back to where we are today in Syria with a dictator named Assad. The truth is, it is relatively easy for a powerful nation like America to overthrow a dictator. But it is very hard to predict the unintended consequences and the turmoil and the instability that follows after you overthrow that dictator. So I think Secretary Clinton and I have a fundamental disagreement. I'm not quite the fan of regime change that I believe she is.
Well, but I would just repeat that, I think it's only fair to put on the record, Senator Sanders voted in the Senate for a resolution calling for ending the Gaddafi regime and asking that the UN be brought in, either a congressional vote or a UN Security Council vote. We got a UN Security Council vote. Now, I understand that this is very difficult, and I'm not standing here today and saying that Libya is as far along as Tunisia. We saw what happened in Egypt. I cautioned about a quick overthrow of Mubarak, and we now are back with basically an army dictatorship. This is a part of the world where the United States has tried to play two different approaches. One, work with the tough men, the dictators, for our own benefit, and promote democracy. That's a hard road to walk, but I think it's the right road for us to try to travel.
And Martha, in this case, we probably let our lust for regime toppling get ahead of the practical considerations for stability in that region. And I believe that one of the big failings in that region is a lack of human intelligence. We have not made the investments that we need to make to understand and to have relationships with future leaders that are coming up. That's what Chris Stevens was trying to do, but without the tools, without the support that was needed to do that. And now what we have is a whole stretch now of the coast of Libya, 100 miles, 150 miles, that has now become potentially the next safe haven for ISIL. They go back and forth between Syria and this region. We have to stop contributing to the creation of vacuums that allow safe havens to develop.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're going to move on here. Governor O'Malley, thank you very much for that. And we're going to make a very sharp turn as we wrap things up here. Secretary Clinton, First ladies, as you well know, have used their position to work on important causes like literacy and drug abuse, but they also supervise the menus, the flowers, the holiday ornaments, and White House decor. I know you think you know where I'm going here. You have said that Bill Clinton is a great host and loves giving tours, but may opt out of picking flower arrangements if you're elected. Bill Clinton aside, is it time to change the role of a president's spouse?
Well, the role has been defined by each person who's held it, and I am very grateful for all my predecessors and my successors, because each of them not only did what she could to support her husband and our country, but often chose to work on important issues that were of particular concern. Obviously, Mrs. Obama has been a terrific leader when it comes to young people's health, particularly nutrition and exercise, and I think has had a big impact. So whoever is part of the family of a president has an extraordinary privilege of not only having a front row seat on history, but making her or maybe his contribution. And with respect to my own husband, I am probably still going to pick the flowers and the china for state dinners and stuff like that. But I will certainly turn to him as prior presidents have for special missions, for advice, and in particular, how we're going to get the economy working again for everybody, which he knows a little bit about.
I do want to follow up here for each of you. A similar line of questioning. Senator Sanders, your wife Jane shares an office at your campaign headquarters in Burlington. We've seen the pictures, the desks right next to each other. Would she have a desk close by in the West Wing?
Given the fact that she's a lot smarter than me, yes, she would. And let me, by the way, take this moment to congratulate Hillary Clinton, who I thought not only did an outstanding job as our First Lady, but redefined what that role could be. So I thank you very much for that. My wife, Jane, has been, way back when, before I knew her, a foster parent. Many, many kids came into her home and received the kind of love that they desperately needed, and she turned around many lives. She is the best parent and grandmother that I know. She has devoted her life. When I was mayor of the city of Burlington, actually when I first met her, we started a youth office, we started a after-school programs for kids, started a child care center, started a youth newspaper. We got the kids involved in a whole lot of issues. She led that effort. So I think at a time when so many of our kids are desperately looking for constructive activity, but too many of our kids are hanging around on street corners, potentially getting into trouble, I think we need a forceful advocate for the children, for teenagers, for the little children, to deal with a dysfunctional child care system. And I think my wife would do a great job in helping me accomplish those goals.
Senator, thank you. Governor O'Malley, you have talked about your wife, Katie, here tonight. She's a district court judge. And the question for you is, would she have to give that up as First Lady, or will she share an office in the West Wing as well?
Well, that would be totally up to her. I mean, Katie has never been a person who let her husband's professional choices get in the way with following her dreams. And I think she got that from her mother, actually. And I readily admit that she is a far more accomplished lawyer than I was ever able to become before I took my detour. She is a district court judge in Maryland. She puts in a full day there. We've raised 4 terrific kids, and yet when she was First Lady of the state, not only would she go to work every day and sit there through a lot of sad and gut-wrenching cases, but then she put in additional time being an advocate against domestic violence. Maryland made great strides on that because of her advocacy and her understanding of how the court process works. She was an advocate against bullying and implementing anti-bullying things. So Katie O'Malley will do whatever Katie O'Malley wants to do, regardless of her husband's success in getting elected president.
Governor O'Malley, so like your thank you. We'll be back with much more from New Hampshire. The Democratic debate continues right after this.
ABC News live coverage of the New Hampshire Democratic debate will continue in a moment. Sailing through the heart of cities and landscapes with Viking, you see things differently. Closer to iconic landmarks, to local life and cultural treasures. It's a feeling that only a river can give you, that only Viking can give you. Spend less time getting there and more time being there. Viking River Cruises. Explore
it's funny. I don't understand how so many people believe Republican bullshit. You need to stretch out your legs, baby.
We can do even more. The goal is 50% clean energy by 2030. So what are we waiting for?
lets you stand out from the herd. What's inside sets you apart. The 2016 Cadillac Escalade.
He's back.
Here again is George Stephanopoulos.
And closing statements are coming up here. The Democratic debate in New Hampshire, joined again by John Carl, Chief White House correspondent. Republicans starting to weigh in on this debate right now, and they're really zeroing in on national security. It has dominated this debate so far. Those comments from Hillary Clinton where she said, we're getting where we need to be on ISIS. Finally where we need to be.
This is her exact words were, we now finally are where we need to be. She was talking about the fight against ISIS. That is something that the vast majority of the American public disagrees with. Wide disapproval with the president's handling of the ISIS threat. Republicans are pouncing on it. Jeb Bush responding with a tweet, no Hillary Clinton, we are not where we need to be in the fight against ISIS. One other thing that's interesting, though, about this whole debate, George, and the Republican response, is the only Republican we've heard by name, the only candidate you pointed out, was Donald Trump. I have not seen a single tweet from Donald Trump.
People expect radio live tweeting tonight.
Radio silence from, well, the debate has been mentioned, and none of his replies.
Well, I can have a chance to respond tomorrow on this debate as well. You saw Martha press Secretary Clinton on the issue of Libya at the end. She tried to point out some differences with Bernie Sanders, but this is something as well that is sure to be, we know for a fact, if she gets the nomination, a general election issue.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Libya was something that for a while she was Secretary of State, she thought was going to be her crowning achievement. She was one that led the fight internally in the Obama White House to intervene in Libya. She was the one who made the case internationally as Secretary of State, and it has, of course, become something of a disaster. Republicans have already pounced on this far beyond the Benghazi issue, the question of what has happened to Libya since the U.S. and Europe intervened.
Okay, time now for closing statements. We'll be right back.
ABC News live coverage of the New Hampshire Democratic debate will continue in a moment. Critics are raving about the Big Short. Really calm down. Okay. It's brilliant, powerful, and explosive. It's the best film of the year.
Say that again.
Riveting and surprising until the very end. Nominated for 4 Golden Globe Awards, including Best Actor Steve Carell, Best Actor Christian Bale, and Best Picture of the Year.
That is crazy.
It's not. It's awesome. The Big Short, rated on Wednesday.
Well, I guess if I had to pick my own big three, it would be me, Rocky and Christmas, and Nerlens Noel. Oh, Drew Holiday. He's good too.
This winter, get big savings at Discount Tire. Buy now and get a $50 Visa prepaid card on any set of winter tires purchased with your Discount Tire credit card. When the temperature drops, winter tires are safer below 45 degrees. Specially designed tread provides a better contact patch for safe handling, and a special rubber compound keeps the tire flexible for superior traction. Stay safe and get your winter tires today.
It's weird.
Thank you. Discount Tire.
We opened this place to serve fresh food. Sell things like preserves and local produce, and offer folks a great place to catch up. These days, a lot of that talk is about fracking. We all know will help the town. But what about protecting the land, the water, and the local farms we support? There has to be balance. So I looked into it and learned that fracking has been unsafe for over 65 years. That says a lot. We really got the conversation flowing.
Join the conversation at energyfromshale.org. Watch Denver Sun tonight at 10. Live from St. Anselm College in New Hampshire, here again are David Muir and Martha Rabbits.
Welcome back tonight. It's been an evening of
It's interesting. This jumped up before it came back. I wonder if my video feed is a little bit behind some other people in the country.
Thank you very much for hosting this debate. And let me applaud
By
my
like 30
colleagues up here, because
seconds.
I think, frankly, maybe I'm wrong, but on our worst day, I think we have a lot more to offer the American people than the right-wing extremists. My father came to this country from Poland at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket, which sparked my interest in the need for immigration reform, because I know what it's like to be the son of an immigrant. We grew up in a 3.5-room rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn, New York. My mother's dream, and she died very young, but my mother's dream for her whole life was to be able to get out of that rent-controlled apartment and own a home of her own. She never lived to see that. But what my parents did accomplish is they were able to send both of their sons to college. We were the first in the family. So I know something about economic anxiety and living in a family that does not have sufficient income. And that is why I am pledged, if elected President of the United States, to bring about a political revolution where millions of people begin to stand up and finally say, enough is enough. This great country and our government belong to all of us, not just a handful of billionaires. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to thank all of the people who have tuned in tonight. I want to thank the great people of New Hampshire, where despite all of the cynicism about big money and big banks taking over our politics, here in New Hampshire, the individual matters. You know, my wife, Katie, and I have 4 terrific kids. And like you, there's probably nothing we wouldn't do to give them a future that's safer, that's healthier, where they have more opportunity than our parents and grandparents gave to us. Tonight, what you listened to was a healthy exchange of ideas about how we do that which we have always proven a capacity to do better than any nation in the world, to take actions that include more of our people more fully in the economic, social, and political life of our country. When you listened to the Republican debate the other night, you heard a lot of anger and you had a lot of fear. Well, they can have their anger and they can have their fear, but anger and fear never built America. We build our country by adopting wage and labor policies, including comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway of citizenship for all. We do it by investing in our country, by investing in infrastructure, by investing in the skills and the talents of our people with debt-free college, and we can do it again. And we also create a better future for our kids when we square our shoulders to the great challenges of our times, whether it's the terror trying to undermine our values or Republican presidential candidates trying to get us to surrender our freedoms and our values in the face of this threat. The other big challenge we have is climate change. The greatest business opportunity to come to the United States of America in 100 years. We need to embrace this. I have put forward a plan that does this, that moves us to 100% clean electric grid by 2050. Join this campaign for the future. New leadership is what our country needs to move us out of these divided and polarized times. Thank you. President, thank you. Secretary Clinton.
On January 20th, 2017, the next president of the United States will walk into the White House. If, heaven forbid, that next president is a Republican, I think it's pretty clear we know what will happen. A lot of the rights that have been won over years, from women's rights to voter rights to gay rights to worker rights, will be at risk. Social Security, which Republicans call a Ponzi scheme, may face privatization. Our vets may see the VA hospital that needs to be improved and made better for them turned over to privatization. Planned Parenthood will be defunded. The list goes on because the differences are so stark. You know, everybody says every election is important, and there's truth to that. This is a watershed election. I know how important it is that we have a Democrat succeed President Obama in the White House. And I will do all that I can in this campaign to reach out and explain what I stand for and what I will do as president. You know, I became a grandmother 15 months ago, and so I spent a lot of time thinking about my granddaughter's future. But as president, I will spend even more time thinking about the futures of all the kids and the grandchildren in this country. Because I want to make sure every single child has a chance to live up to his or her God-given potential. If you will join me in this campaign, we will make that a mission. Thank you, good night, and may the force be with you.
Thank you.
you to the audience here in New Hampshire, here at St. Anselm. And thank you to the audience at home. We wish everyone at home a happy and safe
Yeah, that kind of made me angry too.
all of you, the candidates, a happy and safe holiday with your families. George and the powerhouse political team standing by with analysis. George, over to you.
Thank you, David. The force was with us, we hope, tonight. Thank you for that. Thanks for that great debate. And Matthew, I want to go to you first. The debate began with an apology from Bernie Sanders. It ended with agreement across the stage.
And we missed all that. All right.
I don't think it changed the dominance of this race and the structure of this race. She comes
Okay.
in.
So that was
With a big lead, she's going to go out of this night with a big
that was all like a capture of the debate with the meaners. Maybe somebody captured the beginning of the debate. I don't know. But it is now 8:50 p.m. Mountain Time.